Hey guys, in today's video I want to pay a special tribute to one of my favorite fly tyers out there, Deb Paskall. Thank you so much for your generosity and all that you do for the fly fishing community. This one is called her Flame Arse Blob and it looks absolutely lights out. For today's pattern I'm going to be using Togens Scud hook, size 10 in a 3X heavy. These hooks are awesome. Super durable, especially for these blob patterns. They will stand up to some aggressive takes. We'll be using Togens Select Marabou Plumes for the tail in red, as well as the underbody of this fly. And then for the actual blob material, this is F&F Jelly Fritz. It is atomic yellow, I believe a 15mm diameter. And I'll be tying with Danville's Old 70 denier waxed thread in red color as well. This blob is a super easy pattern to tie if anyone's just learning or starting out in your fly tying journey. It has the marabou tail and underbody, which you often use the same techniques for damselfly creations or leech patterns, so it's a good one to practice on. And then as well you get to work with some of the jelly fritz, which is often used in the popular blob patterns and booby patterns. This is an attractor fly pattern, so it's not trying to imitate anything. It's just a gaudy looking fly that's gonna turn some heads. You want to select the marabou plumes, some of the longer fibers there, and grab about a 3/4 of an inch section of those. Make sure that they're all nice and evenly aligned. And then as you wrap them in, give them just a couple of loose wraps with your thread to hold them in place, and then pull them to the appropriate length. And then at the end of this fly, I'm gonna go ahead and just pinch the tips so that they're all nice and even. And then you noticed there a couple of wraps of thread underneath those tail fibers just to lift them up away from the bend of the hook. And then when you're working with this jelly fritz, snip off a few inches that you'll be working with. It just helps to wrap the fritz around the material, and then pull some of those loose fibers away from the core so that that ties in nice and easy with your thread. And then you'll be grabbing your strands of marabou and twist those up so they're nice and compact. It's going to help out with a little bit of the durability of this fly. And then you want to keep those wraps nice and condensed, making sure that a lot of those feathers are nice and fluffy and standing up. And when wet, this fly will really make those marabou fibers stand through that jelly fritz material, and it just looks awesome in the water. Wrap that marabou up to the eye of the hook, and then lock it off with the thread behind and in front, and then I add a few extra wraps just for security sakes. With this fly, you do want to make sure that you do not crowd the eye of the hook. You still got to tie in this jelly fritz material near the end, so just be cautious as you're getting close to the eye that you do not overcrowd it, and leave yourself enough room to tie a nice little red head on this fly. This fritz material is nice to work with. It helps if you actually dip the material in water beforehand, or if you wet your fingers and push those fibers back as you're wrapping up towards the eye of the fly, making sure that those fibers are swept back with your forefingers. And then as usual, we'll lock off a few wraps in behind the material and then in front. And then with your scissors, try to snip this core without cutting your thread, without cutting any other fibers, and sweep those back as you build up a little bit of a head for this fly. This is where it's very crucial not to crowd that head. This particular specimen is not as accurate as I'd like, but it does give you guys the general idea of how to tie this fly. This pattern, it can typically be fished static under an indicator, or if you have a full sink line or an intermediate sink line in the shallows. and just give a fast, consistent retrieve on this. With any blob patterns, you want to make sure that you maintain tension on the fly line, because they do tend to inhale these flies, and you would want to prevent any damage from getting too far down their esophagus. Then nearing the end of this fly, we'll go ahead and trim off any of the little stragglers up near the head, and then as well we're going to go ahead and pinch off some of the tail fibers to make sure that they're nice and even. And then you'll want to add a little bit of resin or super glue to the head of this fly. It will add in some durability and make sure that everything just keeps locked in place. And then if you do get any resin into the eye of the hook, I always find it's nice and helpful just to get the whip finisher tool or your bodkin and just clear out that eye before any of that resin hardens. This fly is pretty incredible once it does get wet. It's got so much movement in those tail fibers and in the actual blob material itself, and then the red fluffy underbody of that marabou really shines through and just looks like a bleeding blob, and the fish will go crazy for this one, I promise you that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you, Deb, and we'll see you on the waters.